We have time for some Q&A about the activities here. I want to refer back to something we said at the beginning of the conversation, which is our feeling that cloud computing is central to consumer electronics in the future, and Cloud Federation will be a key to the future of cloud computing, in particular related to consumer electronics. In other words, today, as many of our consumer electronics products depend on cloud computing, the future federated cloud will be key for those products going forward in the future, allowing 24/7 worldwide computing resources that talk to one another to make cloud computing federation available for consumer electronic products. So before I go into the Q&A, I just want to put this link slide up on the screen, so you'll have an opportunity to look at these links that have been mentioned during the conversation. And I'd like to start by asking the question, Bob, when we talk about Cloud Federation, what would you suggest as a killer app for Cloud Federation? And then we'll take some questions from the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Do I need the mic?
I think you can come up here.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Thanks, Steve, for that question. I was thinking about that. So when I have Cloud Federation and I think about what Joel is mentioning about adaptive management, I think there's going to be a lot of AI involved in managing the adaptive clouds, or federated cloud and adaptive management. I think that if we're going to need some predictive type of quality, we're going to do that. There's also ways of looking at, you know, what happened in the past, like Joel mentioned, and then try to make some predictive analysis to keep our cloud safe. So I think AI is really going to be a very important issue. However, economically speaking, perhaps it's the concept of cloud wholesaling between different providers doing the cloud economy. So.
I think we have a question. Just raise your hand, we'll get you a microphone.
Yes, it's always easier to standardize when we have a number of actual systems to look at, and we look at the good things and bad things in those systems. What would be the best examples that you have of current cloud federations, if there are any?
Cloud Federation is obviously somewhat new. Most often when you deal with a cloud service provider, you make use of their resources. In some cases within the federal government, you will have situations where you have one government agency kind of acts as a cloud service provider, but they offer the services of their under departments to each other. DoD is a good example of that. Where they might offer sources across different government agencies to bind together to a new one. You're not going to see a whole lot of examples of the Cloud Federation concept, the seamless one that we've been discussing here, because that takes a lot of coordination at the moment and a lot of activities. Some of the common examples you might see it in have to deal with, say, issues of dealing with disaster recovery is quite often to want to be able to mirror your activities across multiple cloud service providers, and that's probably one of the closest examples you're going to get from outside of, say, a specific government agency. But even in that one instance, disaster recovery, I mean, you can start to see the benefit of what Cloud Federation would be. I mean, you might have a disaster in one geolocation that could affect one entire cloud service provider. You might need another one to be able to have some sort of continuity going afterwards. So I can't give you a perfect example, but the little bits and pieces are currently out there.
I think we're at the point of the federation evolution where in order to make a phone call to another part of the country, you have to speak with an operator. And they have to plug you in with the panel board. And so we think of federation as aspirational, and we hope that the opportunities and potential drives users to ask their providers for these kinds of federation options. Tom?
Yes, if you're going into the cloud, you're going into the internet. And sort of riffing off of our lunch keynote speaker, if you heard him, is there anything in these standards that deals with privacy, information security, that sort of thing? And if so, where is that?
Well, I think that's a crucial issue, and probably everybody would be able to address that. Don, do you want to talk about SC27?
Well, I guess the only good news I can give you on that is what I said, is that when the people that came together from around the world to do cloud computing standards recognized that when they needed to write a piece of a standard relating to security, that they chose not to do it themselves, but rather to go to the experts. I can tell you that within JTC1, one of the most visible and most active groups is SC27, which is the group that does security standards. Are they, have they solved the problems that we're all facing and anticipating? No, but that's where my business and most businesses and governments are sending our best and brightest to work on this in the standards environment. So,
Yeah, I guess if there are other questions, I'll bring the mic, but I have one too. Similar to dealing with security issues between the different clouds, there's the commercial issues of cost and remuneration for access to services, and it seems to me they're kind of two different architectural models. One where you have someone issue credentials that are then recognized by others and acts as a clearinghouse. And then there's a telecom world with like separations payments where you go through one to the other, and they get a piece along the way. So the basic question is, are you dealing with any of the commercial, billing, charging, fee-based aspects of this? And is there an architectural model that ties into that, or is that something down the road?
I think Steve picked on the guy that started in Bell Labs in billing systems engineering. So, and the answer to that is actually it really hasn't been. There is currently in SC38 I think it's a study group or something like that right now that has been proposed to look at metering and billing, and I think there's a whole every provider has a different model, and for that matter, every country I think right now has a different model, and not everybody agrees. In fact, there's some significant disagreement. That I think is probably one of the areas down the road that is another piece. We're building a foundation. And that's yet another major piece of the foundation is how do we handle all these things? And the answer may not be there. It may be there is not a single answer, by the way. I have a sneaking suspicion we cannot do it knowing how the telecom world was done and knowing how the other ones and having been involved in designing those. We can learn from those, but we can't build it like that because in my perspective, the cloud world is going to be a very dynamic and very rapidly changing world that can respond to dynamic requests, tear downs, creations of new federations and things. The telecom model certainly was built around a very static world. We've got the same problem with management. Even the IP world has been built around a fairly static model when it comes down to it. So we've got to build something and think about something that can handle a very dynamic model and handle it on the fly. So that's going to be a major challenge from metering and billing perspectives. And right now, we don't have an answer.
Well, it goes without saying, though, if someone doesn't pay for it, it won't happen.
Exactly right. Yes.
Steve, how late do you want to go? There's no one else in this room. There's some other sessions starting, but I don't see there's any reason why we can go as long as this guys.
We're happy to answer any questions or discuss afterwards. We'll be here in the room to talk about this. Are there any other official questions?
Even unofficial ones. All right.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I want to thank the panel. Please give them a round of applause. In particular, as we said earlier, this, I think, is going to be a critical asset for the future of consumer electronics, just as the internet has proven to be a critical asset for the future of computing. And telephones, although nobody uses them anymore, at one point were very important to the world. So for your future consumer electronics products and your future research, I think it's important to look at Cloud Federation as an enabler for the kind of infrastructure that we're going to need for these products. Thanks for staying here and talking with us. We'll be around here in the room for a bit if you'd like to come up and talk with any of us, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks for inviting us.
Panasonic.